Welcome to The Change, a podcast about the changes in life that can shake, break, and make us. I'm Laura, a 44-year-old writer, podcaster, and mum who has until recently always loved change.
And I'm Kathy, 52-year-old writer, podcaster, and mum. And change is actually my kryptonite. We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia on which this podcast is recorded, and recognise continuing connections to lands, waters and communities.
We pay our respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and elders past and present.
Hi Laura.
Hey Kathy, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. How about you?
I'm pretty good. I'm excited to talk to our guest today, Amy Lovat. She is the author of Mistakes and Other Lovers. She's the founder of Secret Book Stuff and program manager of the Newcastle Writers Festival. She's just an all-round clever woman. She has a PhD in English and writing, and she lives with her wife, Laura, 2 dogs, a bird, and thousands of books across unceded Awabakal and Gadigal country in New South Wales, Australia. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us on the Change podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here, and congratulations to you both for this podcast. It's so cool.
Thank you. I'll kick off. You have been through quite a bit of change in the last 12 months. Your first novel was published, so congrats to you on that. And now you are a married woman. So tell us how these experiences have changed you or how you see yourself.
It has been a big year, actually. I just feel like I've ticked all of my, big life boxes in the 1 year, and hopefully next year will be quieter. I started the year with, I got a promotion at work, which was a dream job. And then I had my book published, and then I left my job and got another dream job at the Newcastle Writers Festival. And then I also got engaged this year, and then eloped, and then had a wedding. So it's a bit ridiculous. But I'll go backwards. Being a married woman feels exactly the same as being a non-married woman. Weirdly, actually, it's not that weird. I just don't think that it has to change anything in this day and age, because we're already living together and nothing's changed. Like, we don't even have rings. We haven't changed our names. Like, it's just exactly the same. So that doesn't feel any different. But I suppose if I reflect back on the year that has been, even though it's been such a busy year and so many big things have happened, I actually feel like I have felt the most grounded I have in a really long time. And maybe it's part of pushing 35 or just sort of ticking these big life goals. I always knew that I wanted a book published, and then it happened. And so people said to me at the time, it's just the best feeling in the world. Like, are you so excited? Are you so over the moon? And I felt bad that inside my answer was no. It's not that this isn't amazing, but it just kind of feels like, oh, this is how it was meant to be. Like I'd always imagined it. And so I wasn't just like losing my mind with the amazingness of it. It was incredible, but it also just felt like real life. And that was quite nice. And that was very, grounding. So I feel like I've really settled into myself in a way this year.
And also, I think, you worked really hard to have a book published. You know what I mean? It's not just like it was, surprise, you've won the lottery. It's like, you worked really hard.
It was 11 years in the making. So
yeah.
Not really an overnight success, right?
No.
Yeah, it was a long but amazing journey. And you mentioned just before we started recording, actually, talking about marriage, that you are going to change your names. Tell us what that name is, because I just think it's lovely.
So my name is Amy Lovat, and since primary school, people have always just called me Amy Love. And that's my Facebook name, and it was my Instagram name for a long time until I thought it might confuse people when my book came out. So I changed it to my official name. And, we weren't really that keen on changing our names to one or the other.
Yeah.
So we just thought, well, let's just not change our names. But then we thought, if we ever have children, we kind of would like them to have the same name. So our intention is to become the Loves. So we'll be Amy and Laura Love. Which is also
and I love that.
Cool, because it's not too far from my name anyway. It's what people call me, but it's also like we're carving a new path together.
I think that's lovely, and I've heard of couples choosing a name together, but I think that's nice that you've chosen one that has meaning already. But also, I mean, what a
Mm.
great name!
What a
Yeah.
great
Surely,
name. Love
yeah.
is love, you know?
Love is love. It's lovely. Um, but I guess today we're kind of here mostly to talk about the change you went through by falling in love with a woman, your already mentioned
Mm.
wife, Laura. In 2017, you went for a coffee date. Can you tell us what had been happening in the lead up to this meeting?
So Laura and I think we originally connected on social media because we both wrote for the same magazine. So we were kind of reading each other's articles and then we followed each other online, and um, our social media relationship just kind of developed from there. I think we realized that we had a lot in common and that we had, very similar humor and banter, and we loved talking about books, and I would recommend books and she would actually read them, which doesn't happen now 6 years later, by the way. Um, and then we'd talk about it. And then we sort of ran into each other out and about in Newcastle a few times. And each time we would end up spending like hours chatting. And then eventually, I think it was Laura who was like, should we, do you want to get coffee? Because we hadn't actually planned to sit down together and hang out. It just sort of happened accidentally once or twice. And then, yeah, and then she said, do you want to get coffee? And so I just thought, this cool chick who I'm becoming friends with. I sort of sensed that she had a crush on me, and I knew that she was gay. Um, but I didn't really think much of it. Like, I didn't really think it was that big of a deal. But I did notice that when I was really excited when I would run into her, or when she would text me, my heart would do that little skip a beat thing that happens when you're crushing on someone. But I guess I just sort of, like, I really just didn't hone in on it. I didn't think about it that much until sort of after that first coffee date, and then, which wasn't really a date. I mean, I think Laura thought it was, but and then we planned to hang out one other time, which was New Year's. Um, and she'd been working and I'd been at a different party, and then I had said that I wanted to spend the actual New Year by myself in my room listening to music and like reflecting on the year and reading a book or something. And she was like, or we could break into the bookshop that I work at and alphabetize the books. Which we didn't do, by the way, in case her former boss is out there listening. We didn't end up doing that, but we did end up hanging out, and that's when, we kissed and the universe kind of tilted on its axis, and I was like, oh, okay, like this is
Mm,
this is a thing. So
yeah.
yeah,
That
Wow.
it just sounds so beautiful.
It
it
does.
was.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And also the book, the kind of mutual love of books and the cheeky idea for the date. I mean, it's perfect.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
And so I guess, meeting Laura and then the kiss, your life had obviously already kind of changed already from that moment on. How was it those next few weeks and months after you kind of went, oh, hang on a minute, this is not just a friendship?
So I think I was just really conscious that I didn't, because I knew by that point that Laura had real feelings for me, and I didn't want to be, the cliche of the straight girl who's just experimenting while she's single, and I didn't want to hurt her, so I was very
Mm.
conscious of that. And so I made a great effort to, speaking of grounding, ground myself and just kind of like sit with myself and not get lost and swept up in it all the excitement of the new crush kind of thing, because I really just wanted to be careful about how I was treading. And that was never really to do with me or like questioning my sexuality. Weirdly, I look back and I wasn't like, oh, am I gay? Am I not? Who am I? What is this? Like, this has never happened before. I just didn't like it. Honestly, just it just flowed, and I had always been, kind of open
Mm.
anyway. And so I just didn't really question it. I was just actually really concerned about her
Mm.
and
Mm.
her feelings. And so I've never actually, I don't think I've told many people this. Laura knows. I joined Tinder for the first time after Laura and I hooked up for that first time, because I was like, I need to date a few boys just to check what's going on here, just to check if this is real. And so I joined Tinder. for like 2 weeks, and I went on 2 dates,
Mm.
and both of them, I was just like, Laura's just so much cooler than you
Mm.
guys. Like, I just really, like, it helped me realize that what I was feeling was also real and that it was kind of okay. And so then I just um, leaned into it, and I went away with my family for a week, and then I stayed with a friend on the way home. And I was telling her about Laura, and I was worried that I was hurting her and going to hurt her and all this stuff. And she said, "You can die tomorrow. Just date the girl." And I was
Mm.
like, so simple, great advice.
Love that.
Yeah. And then this series of weird things happened, which I wrote about in an article for The Guardian a few months ago, where like she took me for coffee, like my friend took me for coffee at a cafe on Laura Street, and it was the
Wow.
Laura Street Cafe, and then there was a big blackboard out the front that said hashtag I love Laura on it. While I'm like questioning how I feel about Laura, and it was just all these crazy signs, and I
Signs.
ended
Yeah.
up flying home and going straight to her house and telling her that I loved her, which is really weird because
Mm.
we'd kissed once, we'd had one coffee date, and I just was declaring my love for this person, which I never would have done. Like when I was dating men, it was all like playing the game and
Mm.
holding your cards close
Mm.
to your chest, and not giving anything away and waiting for them to say I love you first and all that shit. And I
Yeah.
just never felt like I had to do that, and it was really beautiful.
It's just natural. And did she,
Mm.
can I ask, did she reciprocate the same feelings?
Imagine if I was like, "Oh, no," then
Yeah.
it got awkward. No,
Yeah.
she did. She was like, "Oh, that's really convenient because I love you too."
Oh,
Oh, that's
beautiful.
so lovely.
Yeah,
It
and then
just,
it was
yeah,
on.
Mm.
sounds like serendipitous, that,
Mm.
that
Yeah.
really, it was everything just came together for you in those
Mm.
moments and really lined up for you.
Mm. Meant to
Yeah,
be.
and then
Perfect.
it
Mm.
did really feel like that, and it just felt very easy, and it felt like it was very in flow, and we were in like a little love bubble, so even the process of then, telling people
Mm.
wasn't too scary. Like some people I was a
Mm.
bit nervous, but most of the time it just I can't even find the words for it. It just felt so normal, and
Mm.
no one was really very shocked as well, which I was shocked by. People were like, "Oh yeah, okay, cool." And it was
Mm.
not that I was shocked because I thought they were gonna have a problem with it. It was just that when I was like, "Oh, you don't seem very surprised," they were just like, "Oh, well, we just know you and you seem really happy and you've always like been pretty open about things, so we've just imagined that this isn't a big deal for you." And I was like, "Well, cool. At least I've been
Yeah.
presenting myself in that way, which is how I think about myself, but it's nice to have other people validate that for you. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so
That's
then
Yeah.
it was just
cool.
like a few weeks of the slow reveal to friends and family and the Instagram reveal eventually and
The hard
all that
launch.
stuff.
Mm.
Hard launch, yeah.
Yep. I mean, you mentioned family there. Was anyone in your family surprised? Because you were only, and correct me if I'm wrong, in straight relationships prior to meeting Laura. Is that right?
Mm, yep.
Yeah.
Um, I think there was definitely an element of surprise
Mm.
and confusion. And just sort of, I remember, for example, my sister said to me, and I lived with my sister at the time, so
Yeah.
she had come to know Laura well, and during that time, and she was like, "So how do you know this is different from all the other times when you were in love with someone?"
Mm.
And I was like, "Well, first of all, it's not, because being in love is being in love, right? And that's the point. This doesn't really feel very different. It just feels amazing."
Mm.
But I also saw her point because she had seen me, in a few long-term relationships over the years that, um, you know, had ended, and she'd also seen me in like some of the periods between those long-term relationships kind of fall hard and fast for someone, and then it all turned to shit, as we
Mm.
do.
Yeah.
And so I think she was being protective of that. But then that's all I needed to say. I was just like, well, I just know, like, I just
Yeah.
feel it. I know that I
Yeah.
love her in that
Mm.
way. And she was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And that was it. So yeah, it was
Is
like,
it?
there were some tough times with family that I won't go into too much because
Mm.
it's not just my story to tell, but then I don't want, and the reason I just touch on that lightly is because I don't want anyone listening to think that it was all roses and that
Mm.
everything was perfect and that their experience might be different to that. And so that's a bad thing. and it's not, because a lot of people do have really tough coming out stories. And,
Yeah.
while I don't, and I'm grateful for that, there were definitely some tough times over the years. Yeah.
I mean, I know as a parent, I've got girls and boys. I have twin daughters and a son. And I've always said to my kids, because they're all adults now, and I've always said, it doesn't matter to me and their dad. It doesn't matter to us who they're with, as long as they are with someone that treats them with kindness and respect. But if I'm really honest, like in myself, like, I kind of, it's just like, but how do you know? Like, how, because obviously I'm not attracted to girls, so it's like, how would they know? And so to hear that is really kind of beautiful for me as a parent to older children, to know that, like, as long as it's somebody who does treat them with kindness and respect and loves them for who they are, that really is the most important thing to me.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
beautiful. And it's true, because how do you know, in any sense? Like, if I was dating a man and I came to my family and said, I'm in love with this person now and we're together, they could say, well, how do you know?
That's
Yeah.
In the
right.
same way
Yeah.
that they could say that from someone of the same sex, so it really is like, it's been an interesting lesson in realizing that it's the person at the center of the story who you should trust implicitly.
Yeah.
Some other people in your life might have an idea of who you are and what you're all about and what's best for you, and usually it comes from a place of love and protectiveness, but ultimately it's the person, it's the protagonist of their story who
Absolutely.
gets to choose what they want and who they love. And that can't be, and even if it is, like I used to say a few times, even if this is a mistake, it's okay.
Yeah.
We're allowed to make mistakes. Everyone
Yeah.
makes mistakes. I could make a mistake with a guy, and I have done many times.
And many people do.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and we all do. And so, like, why is this mistake in particular so much scarier? It doesn't have to be. And, it turns out it wasn't a mistake, which is amazing. It wasn't a phase. But even if it was, I used to say, even if it's a phase, just let me have this phase,
Yeah.
because what's the harm? So I think that we can just be a bit scared of what we don't know, what we've never seen before, or what might come as a surprise. But yeah, so that's been something that's really landed for me over the years, and that I hope to remember if I ever become a parent, because I know that, like, I know that as a parent you must just, like, love your children so fiercely, and it's scary almost how fiercely you love them and want the best for them. And so it can feel like you just want to, wrap them in cotton wool or control all their choices, because you think you know the right ones. But ultimately, even if you
There's
do know the right ones, they're gonna fuck up, just
Yeah.
like you did.
Oh
Yeah.
God, that's right. And I think there is, like you say, there's just that trust, isn't there? And I think, God, I look at my boys and they're still pretty young, 13 and 6. But gosh, I hope they get to experience a love in whichever way, that presents itself, because, being in love and having a partner is, it's wonderful when it works out well. And, I've met you and Laura, and I can see the love that you guys have for each other. And I think, God, if one of my kids gets lucky enough to meet someone that they love, whether, whoever that is, it is a wonderful thing. And I think as parents, you just have to go, yep, I'm here. I'm here for you. And I trust that you, have made the right decision.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And on the sort of subject of love, because in the Guardian article that you've already mentioned, where you write about falling in love with Laura, and you wrote this line where you said, Laura was gay, whereas my sexuality was more nebulous. And I just wondered what you kind of meant by that, and how that sort of change in you has developed over time.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess what I mean by that, I felt like my sexuality was nebulous, was just sort of a little bit of what I said before, in that I always knew I was kind of open to anything, and that I didn't actively seek out same sex relationships. Actually, I never really actively sought out a relationship full stop, because I have I've just been someone who's fallen into these long-term relationships with people just through meeting them. I never, other than that 2-week Tinder period, I was never on the apps or anything like that. So I wasn't actively seeking anything out. I just knew that I fell in love with people. And I was so aware of that, I think, because I had seen around me that people tended to have like a type that they always went for. But I never had a type. Like, the people who I dated are so wildly different. It's ridiculous. And I think that's just because for me, it's about connection more than anything else. And so, in that sense, I kind of knew that maybe I wasn't 100% straight. Like, I never even identified as straight, because if you're straight, you don't really have to identify yourself, because
Yeah.
that's just the given, which is so interesting as well. But I did know that I wasn't 100% straight. And then, but I also knew I wasn't gay, because I had relationships with men, and men who I loved and men who I was attracted to. And so I guess that like, saying that my sexuality was nebulous was just in comparison to Laura being gay. Like, she knows she's gay. And I think that the labels are an interesting thing as well. Like, I had the privilege of never having to label myself until I fell in love with Laura. And I also still feel like I have a privilege of not having to label myself, because first of all, other people do it for you anyway. And, that's nothing you can do about that. And secondly, I don't feel like labels are particularly empowering for me. And I know that they are for some people, that it's really important for them to have a specific label or a group of people that they can kind of feel that they're in community with. But for me, I don't, I guess if you want to get technical, I would be pansexual, which means I'm attracted to all genders. But I just don't feel that way. I don't think that way. I just know that I fell in love with Laura.
Yeah.
I dated men, then I fell in love with Laura. Now I'm married to a woman, and I'm attracted to people, and I find connection and love connection with people. So I call myself queer, and I know that that is a slur for some people, especially given history. But for me, and for a lot of young people in the LGBTQIA plus community, queer is just a beautiful rainbow umbrella term for anything that is not heterosexual.
It would be really lovely if we did come to a point in the world, I guess, or life or whatever, where, as you said, labels don't matter. Like, it's not about who you're with or who you love, or it's that you're happy. Really, that is the important part, like, not what the label is.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
No, for sure. There's been a few examples recently of high-profile celebs coming out of straight relationships, falling in love with women. Natalie Basingthwaite, I don't even know if I even said that correctly, but she recently hard launched her girlfriend Piploff on Instagram. Most people were obviously very lovely, but many people wrote horrible things on her Insta and obviously DM'd her, and she had to come out and sort of make this announcement asking people to stop. I mean, obviously those people are awful. But what still needs to change, do you think, Amy, before people will stop worrying about these labels? And why do people get so upset about who loves who? And, just because Natalie once, like you say, loved a man and now loves Pip, why are people so odd and awful about it?
It's a tough one. I think people are afraid of what they don't understand. So I think that, particularly with someone like Nat Bass, who, as I affectionately call her,
I like that. I should have just said that. Yeah,
Nat
Nat
Bass,
Bass.
my mate Nat Bass. What she, like, the fact that she was married to a man and had this very conventional nuclear family and relationship, and then suddenly is with someone who's non-binary, is scary for people because they don't get it. I think that maybe to an extreme point, maybe are fearful of themselves, and they're like, what if I wake up one day and break up with my husband
Oh, no.
and then go and marry a woman? Like, and I just think that I don't know what the answer is to why people are so like worried about what other people do with their
Threatened or
lives.
something.
I will never understand it, and it just absolutely baffles me on a daily basis
Mm.
that people care about what other people do with their lives or with their love or with their bodies. It's just so baffling to me. Like, how does it concern you? How does it
Yeah.
concern you that this celebrity on Instagram hard launches their new partner? What ticks over in someone's inner
Yeah.
workings that makes them feel like they have to then comment on that? It's
Yeah.
so bizarre. And in terms of like what needs to change, I'm going to sound really glass half empty here, and I'm not that kind of person, but I genuinely think that things can change. Like, I think that normalizing all kinds of relationships and all kinds of gender expression and identity and all of that is really important moving forward. Like, just the fact that there are so many books and movies and TV shows that feature queer people and queer characters and queer couples without it really being a thing. Like, it's not a
Yeah.
big deal. If you have a same-sex couple in a show, a TV show, they don't have to be at the center of it. It doesn't have to be about them. It doesn't have to be about their coming out story or whatever. They're just there because we're all here.
Yeah.
We all just exist in society. And so if like that can start becoming more reflected back at us in our culture and our popular culture, I think that will be a big step forward. But at the end of the day, I really don't think that things are going to change enough for people to stop being assholes, because the reality is there are always going to be assholes, because there are people who, spend their lives probably really unhappy in themselves and therefore projecting that onto other people and judging them. But also, in a less extreme kind of way, there are people who just have different viewpoints and different religions, and there are always going to be differences in society. And I think that's a good and beautiful thing. It would be nice if people could be different to each other and also respect each other. And I think that a lot of what we saw on Nat Bass's post, I just dipped in a little bit, but then I had to stop,
Yeah.
is the kind of like, well, I believe in this, therefore you shouldn't do that. And it's like, well, no, if you believe in that, that's fine. No one's telling you to go marry a woman.
That's
No
right.
one's telling you to go be gay. Like, I remember seeing in New York years ago when they were lobbying for same-sex marriage over there, there was this huge billboard that was like, if you don't like gay marriage, don't get gay married. And I just could not put it better myself. It's like, let people do what they're doing, love and respect them from a distance. You don't have to do that too. Just shut up.
Yeah,
Just
for
stop.
sure. Yeah, just
And
stop.
I think you were,
Mm.
before you said it perfectly when you said, like, why does it matter to other people? Like, why does it really matter at all? Like, it doesn't impact my life. No one's asking me to sleep with a woman, like,
No.
so it, like, if it doesn't impact my life, why do I care so much? Kind of does come back to that old adage as kids we were always told, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. But it
But
is
that's
actually,
it.
it
Don't
really
comment.
is true, right?
It's so bizarre because, like, I even think about it with all of my close friends who are now mothers, as of the last couple of years. And I hear all of these stories of these mothers groups and, people judging each other, and people like, a friend of mine would be like, oh, it was so awkward at the park the other day because I offered a snack to my friend's kid. And then the mother was like, oh, we don't do refined sugar in our family. And I felt so judged. And I just, and I always like just think about that. And I'm like, okay, so why, if you do feel judged, or if you are judging someone for how they, what kind of food they give to their kids, why do you care? Why do you care what food is given to this child? Like, it's such a simple example that seems to have absolutely nothing to do with gay marriage, but it's a similar thing. It's like, why does it concern you what's happening over there? If it doesn't affect your life, let them be,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're all such good judges, at times. And I think it's one of those, people have particular things like the refined sugar, that's a definite. I've been judged many times over poor snack choices.
Yeah. I genuinely
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that has changed the most for me over the years is like the older I get and the more self-work I do, the more I kind of let go of
Mm.
what's around me in a way. Like I remember, back in the day I've never been a big drinker, for example. I've always, I was like a bit of a health nut when I was in my 20s. And so I didn't have big drinking nights. And I would sometimes feel judgmental towards people who drank so much that they passed out or made bad decisions. And now I couldn't give a fuck. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to go and do that, I literally don't care. I'm still going to love you, like, and I think that's just something that has happened with maturity and self-awareness. And I think a lot of the people who you see commenting judgmental things on Instagram posts, for example, are people who haven't done the self-work. They literally have not realized that it doesn't concern them. Like they don't even know that it doesn't concern them because they haven't done the work to, gain that self-awareness, which
Yeah.
is sad. And I wish the best for them.
Yeah, that's very noble of you, because those people don't deserve your love, but they do. I know what you mean. It's like they just don't have that insight and ability to see that we're all human and we're all able to fail at various things at various times, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You are writing a second book, and as you
Mhm.
mentioned, you're helping to curate the Newcastle Writers Festival in 2024, which I'm very excited about, living here in Newcastle. Are there any changes, big and small, that you still want to make in your life going forward?
Mm. It's been such a big year of change. As I said before, I'm kind of excited for a quieter 2024, but knowing me and my
Mhm.
life, it's probably not going to happen. And that's okay because I actually love change. I used to be quite scared of change when I was younger, but the older I get, I just think like change is inevitable. If you try and resist it, you're going to cause your own kind of heartache and friction. So just go with the flow. So I don't actually have any particular conscious changes that I want to make in 2024, other than just the continual self discipline of sitting down and writing this effing book. I am such a queen of procrastination. And I'm so busy with other jobs and other projects that I can very easily not do my own writing for a very long time. And then suddenly it's been 2 months of not sitting down and I feel horribly guilty. And that's not a good place to be creating from. Guilt is not the place to be trying to bring magic words out onto the page. So I just have to maintain my self discipline next year and hope for the best with that.
I'm sure you'll get it done.
You will.
Thank you.
Amy, our podcast is called The Change, which is in part a reference to the kind of midlife experience that all women experience. So whether it's perimenopause or menopause. So we'd really love to know what your experience, if you're there, or and being 35, you're probably not, but what your experience or feelings are when you hear the change.
I know you say that you're 35, you're probably not there yet, but I am already noticing the change. I know it. Like, this is the first year, I think, of my life that I have started to recognize little changes in my body, and like I'm getting little bald patches,
Oh,
which has
Wow.
never happened before. And just little things like that.
Yep.
You start to go, oh my God, like age is catching up with me. Because for so long you think it doesn't concern you.
Yeah.
Like I've been hearing people around me talk about perimenopause and menopause for years now. And, I listen to Mamma Mia Out Loud and other podcasts like that, and they talk about it a lot. And I always felt for a long time, I'll cross that bridge. But one of the things that has actually made me really conscious is hearing of people's experience of the changes in women's bodies and realizing that I never heard about that when I was growing up. And no one ever really talked about it. And my mum didn't talk about it. Like as a 30, almost 35-year-old woman, I'm embarrassed to say that I only asked my mum a few weeks ago when she went through menopause, like, And we had this big conversation about it, which we've never had before. And I felt kind of guilty about it because even though she didn't talk about it, she's not much of a sharer
Mhm.
anyway. I would have loved to know in a way when that was happening for her because I can
Mm.
like look back. My sister and I have talked about this too. We reckon we can look back and know when it happened for mum because that was the years that were like more troubling for our relationship or that, she was angrier
Mhm.
than usual and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I
Because she
think
was
like I hear
hot.
this,
I'm just going to
yeah,
say
she was
she was
hot
hot.
and she was moody and like,
Mm.
we just thought that she was just being mum and but like a more extreme version. And now I think, my God, like poor woman, she was probably going through so much. And maybe she didn't even know because 15 years ago, people weren't talking about it as
Yeah,
much
it's
as they are
changed.
now anyway. So it's so different for her being like in her mid 60s now. And I just really hope that like as I get older and if I do have children that I really want to talk openly about these kind of things
Mm.
because even if you're talking about them and they don't care because they're not going to care when they're a preteen who's thinks you're a loser whatever. I do think it's
Relate.
important like just to normalize the whole conversation
Yeah.
about everything like even when I was in high school until I was in my later years of high school like even periods were a weird taboo topic between us girls. Like I remember getting my period and being so scared and embarrassed about telling
Mm.
anyone. And now I just like I'll tell anyone. Like if I'm teaching at the uni, I've stood up in front of my students before and been like, guys, I have really bad period pain today. And you just like watch some of their faces go, oh, so awkward. And I just refuse to be awkward about it. And I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
I want that to be the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very, very wise move. I do that with Toby. He's 13 and obviously quite awkward, but I say to him, I'm grumpy today because I'm hormonal. It's probably the perimenopause. He's already sick of hearing it. So, yeah,
I
I
love
think
that.
it's fine. He's going to cop that a lot. Yeah, so that's smart. So I think that's a very good way to look at the change as you,
Yeah.
Mm.
experience more of it going forward. Amy, thank you so much for talking to us and good luck with that book writing. I hope you manage to find the time and the headspace and get it done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I can't wait to read it too when I write it.
Gosh, what a chat.
Mm,
She was just so beautiful and so open with us
mm,
and yeah, like clearly very much in love. And, as she said, it wasn't about the gender of the person, it was who the person was and that connection.
yeah. And I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because she's only just about to turn 35, which puts her like a decade younger than me and a couple more years younger than you. And I do even think that decade is really important. And I think, say Generation X, which is kind of our
Mm,
generation, we're a little bit behind. And I think even though most open-minded people of every generation can clearly see that love is love and that it's not important who and as you say which gender, but I think there's something about millennials being that first generation just to be so much better at just being like, you know what, I love who I love and I'm just gonna be out there and proud and tell people. And I think can only be a good thing, right? That they're just,
absolutely.
yeah.
I know we touched on it when we were chatting with Amy, but if you think of mostly high profile women that are
Mm.
actually coming out and, leaving their husbands and
Yeah, like Nat Bass, like we
finding,
mentioned.
yeah,
Yeah.
Nat Bass. And, there's been quite a few recently
Mm,
who are finding love with other women or
mm,
non binary. And, you know, I wonder if they were born today or if they were
mm.
born, as
In the early
millennials,
2000s. Yeah.
whether they would even have felt the need or the pressure, perhaps. Perhaps it's just that societal pressure that was the norm, that was the done thing. You found
Yeah.
yourself a husband, you met a nice bloke and you settled down and you had a traditional family. And
Mm,
I think we know these days that that isn't what a traditional family has to look like,
absolutely not. That's right.
and I think it's really beautiful just to see people that are happy. For me, that's the biggest takeaway, is that happiness is so much more important
Mm.
than fitting to that societal norm.
Oh, 100%. Imagine living your life, in fear of the societal norm not being your experience. And I think, you know, for so many decades prior to where we're at now, there's still a lot of work and a lot of things that need to change. I know it's not a perfect scenario, certainly not. But, you know, I look back to, we watched the Freddie Mercury documentary recently and just how awful it was coming out as, you know, as gay back in the 80s and 90s, and just how thankfully things have changed. And you realize when you watch something like that, that yes, we are in a different, very different society, but yet when you see the hateful comments on someone like Nat Bass's Instagram a page, you realize, yeah, there's still a lot of people that are afraid. Like Amy said, that it's fear of difference. It's maybe threatening your own religious or personal values, looking at someone and going, well, that's not what I want to do. But then why do you care what other people want to do? And that's the next step, isn't it? Just going, well, I might not agree, or I might not, like you say, I might not be in love with other, you know, I might not be gay myself, but that doesn't mean that I can't be happy for somebody else. Certainly not someone you don't know. And that's bizarre to me.
Yeah, I'd really love to see, you know, and hopefully we do see it in our lifetime, where we get to a place where people can just kind of accept, like, that person is doing, you know, whatever they're doing, you know, they've got green hair or they've got, you know, whatever, they love who they love, or, you know, it doesn't really matter. But if it's not impacting my life or it's not hurting other people.
That's right. Yeah, it's
then
not.
why should I care? Like,
Correct.
you
Yeah.
know, I mean, obviously, if it's hurtful or if it's hateful, well, then, yeah. But if it
Not in the
doesn't,
case of love. And yeah,
you
that's
know, if it
right.
doesn't
Yeah.
impact me, why say horrible, nasty things? But
Yeah.
there was a lot for me to think about, you know, as I guess a parent of older children. Not that I'm not at that point, you know. My son is in a very, very happy relationship, and my twins, they, you know, they're in no relationships.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I just want to see them happy, you know.
I think that's right. And I think what's really great, and I know I already do this as a parent, I think it's important, is like I tell my boys, oh, well, you know, my friend so and so, you know, Amy has married Laura, and you know, it's like, you know, girls marry girls, boys can marry boys. It's just, and I think the more that kids just see that and see examples of it out in their own community, in their, you know, within their family, within their friendship circles in a wider sense, then it just becomes normal, doesn't it? And it's just like, oh, well, there's my mum's friend Amy, who's got her wife is Laura, and it's just, you know, I personally didn't have that experience growing up, even though, you know, growing back in the 90s, it wasn't a thing. Now it is, and now it's important for our kids to see it and understand it and just see that it's totally normal, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. I think it is that, you know, you can't be what you can't see, you
That's
know.
right.
And I see definitely with my kids, you know, they're just like, it genuinely doesn't matter to them. They switch between pronouns, they switch between sexuality, like, this is my friend, and this is, none of it matters to them. I really am learning a lot from my kids in that respect, and hopefully in subsequent generations it can just be about love. And
that's right. Just keep on keeping on.
Thanks for listening to The Change, a fully independent podcast. Whether you're seeking inspiration, curious about change, or just here for the great banter, we'd love you to make The Change your new go-to podcast.
And even better, send us your voice notes or questions about change. We'll use them on the show. Email us at changepod2023@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at _change_pod. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram for more on The Change.